Welcome to the Reverie Nature Podcast. Get ready to explore a series of episodes on the nature experience, from engaging bushcraft, reading animal tracks and sign, exploring the world of nature soundscapes, and much more. But before we dig in, a big thank you to our listeners. Please take this moment to subscribe and offer your support to the podcast. Welcome back. Today we continue with part 2 of outdoor clothing. So we've talked about cotton, we've talked about the wools and alpaca, we've talked about the synthetics in all its forms. Let's just briefly touch on skins, on leather, furs. You know, it seems ridiculous to wear leather in the outdoors, doesn't it? But what's happened for eons, right? It's leather clothing and furs. And I do have experience with these. And man, I tell you, I have this leather, sort of an outdoorsy style jacket, and it had a bit of the frill on it and whatnot. You know, it'd be terrible in the rain, of course, even with the frills, which help wick that moisture away from the jacket itself, but so comfortable. Bug proof, great around the fire. And when you get the smoke from the fire on the leather, oh, it just smells wonderful. Yeah, really nice. Yeah, very challenging otherwise. But I do like leather mitts in the wintertime if it's not wet snow. They are great. They're great around the fire. And in fact, I'll have leather gloves for my cooking stove or working with fire, just those leather work gloves. Safe around the fire. You won't burn your hands easily with those on, compared to synthetics where it'll melt right through. I have stories where young recreators with their synthetic stuff on getting too close to the fire or trying to dry their clothes near the fire. Yeah, a couple holes and, $500 later, Anyway, let's move on to furs. Now, we're not going to obviously start wearing furs, but there are real benefits to it. When I lived in the Arctic, for instance, I had a full set of caribou furs that I was wearing. Not all the time, but sometimes. And I tell you, that's as warm as it gets. And there has been studies done, of course, on clothing, lots of studies. And there is one that compared military Arctic gear to what civilians can buy, like, your modern adventure outdoor winter clothing, to caribou skins. And this, I think it was done at the University of Manitoba, but I'm not sure. I do have the research paper somewhere. Anyway, they compared people wearing these different types of clothing, these 3 types: the military cold weather clothing, the outdoor adventure stuff that, civilians can get in the local stores, outdoor stores, and caribou clothing. And they put these people in a cold room where they could control the temperature. They weren't exercising, I don't think. They were just stationary. But they had sensors on their skin, and they took notes, too, on the perceived warmth of the clothing. And I don't remember the exact temperature, but at one point where the temperature was cold enough and enough time had gone by that the modern high-tech adventurer gear and the military cold weather clothing, the body temperature was starting to drop off, as well as the perceived comfort. At that same temperature, and I believe beyond that, the caribou skins actually kept the people warmer. Their body temperature and perceived temperature was actually still going up. Very warm clothing. And it's not just that it's warm, it's ultra lightweight. The clothing I had, I just had a shell, so I had the caribou skin shell, and it was like a pullover with the hood, and then I had the pants, and I had the footwear, and underneath that I'd use a layer of wool. Yeah, but very lightweight. I'd actually keep this clothing in my freezer before I'd use it, because it wasn't fully tanned like some of the leathers you'd have tanned down in southern regions. So it was scraped and stretched, I guess. But otherwise, it was more or less raw. So, I'd keep it in the freezer, and before I'd go to put it on, I'd literally take a spray bottle and I'd lightly spray the inside leather part with water because if it was too dry, it could rip. It was thin leather, this caribou, and it'd be full fur on the outside. So yeah, it seems like a dumb thing to do, but no, that's what you do. You get the leather a little damp, so it's a little stretchy, and it worked great and so light. And I could sit on the ground in that clothing, and he wouldn't feel the coldness come up through. Not like I would with layers of wool or any other material. It's just a wonderful material and so lightweight. The footwear I had, it just looked like slippers, really, almost indoor slippers with wool sticking out on the bottom, and otherwise wool. I mean the fur sticking out on the bottom, but on the inside of the booty, the fur was also had layers of fur on the inside. So very warm. I'd wear wool socks with that. Ultra lightweight. Yeah, really nice. Worked really well. Otherwise, when I was in the Arctic, if I might compare some clothing I had that wasn't traditional, sort of traditional. I had the Canada Goose brand, their extreme weather parka, and that was a pretty common jacket up there too for folks. And it was down, so very heavy. There was so much down in that coat. It was wonderful. Very, very big, and it would go down to my knees. That coat alone was heavier than all my furs put together for going outdoors. But it was warm. But at the end of the day, if I was out for a longer period of time, because that jacket, the bigger jacket, did not breathe, it's down in the middle, and it didn't breathe, and your inside layers would slowly get damp. By the end of the day, the wool was obviously warmer, and you'd start to feel the coldness coming in with my large down parka. Which brings me to another type of material that's wonderful in the outdoors, and that is down. A goose down. It's the lighter feathers, if you don't know, that make just a wonderful insulation. And I tend to use it in a very specific way, but you can get many layers of down, not your insulating layers as well as a shell, or a combination of both is common. You can even get like a Gore-Tex waterproof shell with down on the inside. And what down does so wonderfully is create an insulating layer, a thick insulating layer. What is an insulating layer? Right? You have to have some thickness there. Right? You can't have a great insulating layer that's, a quarter of an inch thick. It's not going to happen. You need some bulk, and down coats create that bulk. They're the big poofy coats, right? And even synthetic coats that are poofy like that create a nice loft. I'm thinking of sleeping bags, those big winter sleeping bags you can get, the down or the synthetics. They're both wonderful because they create this big dead air space. Now, the problem with down jackets is when they get wet, they are useless. Absolutely no value for heat retention once they are soaked. When they're not soaked, though, they are wonderful. And when I was in the Arctic, I had my big down parka, and that was my go-to coat for the most part. If I was camping, it's probably in the caribou or out for longer periods of time. It was sort of either or, convenience versus getting on the furs. However, there is another thing that is a really good use for down. It packs wonderfully. So with a down coat, if you get one with the lighter exterior or the lighter shell, like a really thin nylon, you can pack a really good warm coat into the size of, what would it be? Into like a 2 or 3 liter space. It really condenses well and packs beautifully. And then when you pull it out and shake it, it just expands right back to what it should be. And the insulating layers, as I said, are wonderful. So, like I said, what I have for some types of winter camping or even travel, if I'm not camping, is I might have this down jacket with this very thin outer layer that I compact, and I don't tend to wear it until I'm stopped. But if it's a cold day, and if I'm in like light layers, because you're always overheating in the wintertime, it seems, because it's strenuous work getting through the snow, whether you're skiing, breaking trail. I tend to be off trail more, so that's why it's more work, I guess, or snowshoeing. So it's when you stop, you need that insulating layer on right away. So that's what happens a lot. What some people do is they have that coat in their pack, in its little stuff sack. As soon as they stop, they pull out that down jacket, they get that over, and it just holds the heat in beautifully. It's just a wonderful idea, and a really good tip for you folks who do recreate in the wintertime. However, if I used a big coat like that in cold weather and I was hiking around with it, because it does not breathe, my underlayers would get soaked because I'd be sweating too much, which would get into the coat itself, which would get the damp, and then it loses its insulating value. So for those reasons, I like down as something you put on to stay warm when you're mostly stationary, because if you're exercising at all in these things, they get wet and they lose their quality, insulating quality. So I'm thinking down vests, down jackets. The reason I said with the jacket, the big down jacket I'm talking about, not the parka that I used in the Arctic, but the other down jacket with the light shell, is that this light shell allows it to be compacted well. If you had a thicker or more durable shell, you would not be able to get it packed so lightly, and then to me it loses a lot of its value. It's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? Because you would think with a nice tough shell on the outside, you can walk through the woods and not worry about branches poking holes in it. Because with my down jacket, if I was to walk through the brush, every little stick would probably poke a hole in it. It's that thin of an exterior shell. And I have contemplated getting a shell over that, but that's just extra bulk and not needed, because when that jacket comes on, I'm hardly even walking around. That's a stationary thing. There's another down product that I just love, and that is booties. There's a type of boot you can get it works. The fleece ones, or not the fleece, but the synthetic ones are just as nice. But there's these booties you can get. They're just like big puffy things that you put around your feet. And it's more so for when you just stop for camp, you put these on. And there's usually a harder foam bottom on these, so you can walk around on sticks and whatnot. But they're really thick, so they look like these giant puffy boots that you put on. And I don't wear them in camp so much. I wear them when I go to bed in a sleeping bag. And I know lots of people have the problem of keeping their feet warm in a sleeping bag. And these booties fill up that dead air space by your feet in your sleeping bag. It's hard for your feet to stay warm down there because they have to heat up this big area, for the insulation to start working well for them. But when you put these booties on, it just fills all that space up, and you got these nice, snugly fitting insulating layers on that really make a difference. And when you have to get out of your sleeping bag in the middle of the night for whatever reason, you wear those around camp just for doing what you need to do, getting back into your bag. So just a really, really good tip for 3-season camp, or not 3-season camping, I guess, but more, fall, winter, and spring. You don't need something like that for the summer, I don't think. So that's another great thing for synthetics and for down, are those booties. And when you look into winter camping or camp booties, you'll find those if you search for them. I did also want to talk about headwear, but I think I've sort of covered that for the most part. I did mention that, we lose 90% of our heat from our head. So, minding that and just being onto that is a big deal. So before you get cold, cover your head, right? By the time your body's starting to feel cold, you've let so much heat escape already. You should have had your head covered already. So keep that in mind. Another tip, I talked about the Tilly hats before. There's another, and we talked about the wool Tilly hats. There's another type of hat that I just love to wear, and it looks like an Indiana Jones hat. It's a crushed wool hat. And for summertime, it is wonderful. And there's good reasons for that. It's wool, so it keeps your head warm. Not that you need that in the summer, but if you're out on the river or lakes and it's really hot, what I do with this is I'll dip that into the water, this wool hat into the water, and just shake off the loose water, put it back on my head. And that, because wool takes a long time to dry, especially if it's like a condensed wool, like for a hat, then what happens is that moisture and coolness stays in the hat, and the sun beating down on it, that doesn't come through. You got this nice cool hat for the hot days. You got a nice wide brim for to keep the sun off, and so it works great that way too. So yeah, a nice wide brimmed wool crushable hat are pretty nice. And into the fall and spring too, they add a little bit of warmth up there. I need my ears covered with any kind of breeze and cold air. Some people, it affects their ear cavity or canal, I guess, where you get headaches if you don't keep your ears covered and keep the cold air out. So, yeah, just mentioned the Indiana Jones style hats. They do work nice in the summertime. And I also mentioned the handkerchief as a neck protector for the sun and bugs. One last feature about headwear that should be mentioned is the fur brim around headwear, especially with the parka style hoods that you pull over, and some of them have like a fur brim, and those make a world of difference. And the difference between a real fur brim and a synthetic one is significant as well. The Arctic parka I had a significant wool brim, a fur brim. I don't know if it was coyote or what it was. Great big long guard hairs. We're talking like 4 inches long of fur. And the effects that had on creating this dead air space around my face was incredible. It would just keep the gentle breeze from blowing the heat of my head out of that hoodie. So it would create this wind break, basically. The wind would hit that fur and it would break up, and it wouldn't like I say, disrupt that layer of heat you have around your head. I've had synthetic versions and of the same thing, and they don't work as well, but they do work. But it's to break up that bitter wind from hitting your face and getting rid of that warm layer around your head. So that's something you should really consider if you're doing much winter camping, having a brim with that fur. And, some of the colder weather coats or hoods have a fairly long brim or a long hood. So, the fur might be 3 inches away from your face. You got this long kind of channel where they have to kind of look through. It looks a little odd, but that's the case, and it works really well. The closer your face is to that brim, the harder it is to keep your face warm. So that's another really good tip to consider if you're in the colder weather. I suppose I should also mention the winter hats with the rabbit fur. You see the fold-up hats, the ones that have the side flaps that come down, and you can clip them up over your head if you want, or bring them down and they cover the sides of your face. Those are quite wonderful too. Synthetic or fur, I'd say for most climates in Canada, that works pretty well. The further north you go, the more you probably want to switch to a full-on fur. And even then, it has to be a pretty big hat, because when you need that much insulation when it's that cold, those typically are made to be a little too thin for the really cold regions. Your headwear does need to be windproof though, especially in cold areas. If you're trying to keep your head warm, you can't have the wind blowing through. Same with any clothing. If you're worried about the wind, if you're in a context where it's cool enough or you're damp enough where the wind is going to be a problem, if it cools you off, you need wind protection to keep your body warm. So let's move on to rain gear, that outer shell that keeps the water out. And I think I mentioned earlier, when you get a nylon, a rubberized nylon, or a Gore-Tex, some kind of shell that is waterproof, the fact is that even the Gore-Tex or the more expensive materials that do breathe a little bit, it's hard for that breathability to keep up with the body that's exercising. So you're going to get your layers wet. When it's raining and you put on your rain jacket, you're slowly getting wet from the inside out as well. It's just a matter of degree. So if it's not raining very hard, just a mist, you might be better off not to have a raincoat on at all, and just, not get wet from the inside out that way, and let your clothing breathe to let out those vapors, versus, a heavier rain where you do want the rain gear on. So there is a balance there. Generally, if it's raining hard at all, get the rain gear on, but know that your insulating layers are going to get damp from the inside out that way. And because of this, I tend to go for medium priced rain gear. I have had the very expensive Gore-Tex brands and, I guess the professional looking gear where, it works quite well. Yeah, you do get wet from the inside out. Costs a fortune. Is it worth it? Not to me, for the stuff I do. However, the cheaper stuff, like just a really cheap nylon shell, I don't like that either. What I do like is it's a brand by, I think it's called Helly Hansen, and it's like the stretchable rubber. It's quite stretchable. It's like this nylon, a thin nylon shell with a coating that looks very rubbery, green. And there's a bib set of pants, and there's the top, and it's quite stretchy. So I can put and roomy as well. With rain gear or any pants that you have to put on for your outer shell, I like it so you can pull it right over your footwear. If you have to take your footwear off when it's raining or any other time you need your wind or rain protection on, I'm not a fan of that. I want to be able to pull it right over my boot. And with these Helly Hansen rubberized rainwear, oh, they're just wonderful. I can pull these bib pants right over my boots. They're nice and baggy. They're long enough so they don't, they go right over my boot. Not so they're dragging on the ground, but they're nice and large in that sense. They're quite stretchable, so I can move around in them, and they're not going to rip from me, overstretching them. They're durable enough to walk through the brush and not worry about them ripping. They're just button up, the one I have, but it buttons up in a fashion that overlaps material enough that you don't get wet. The hood's decent. And yeah, they pack up really nicely, so they're not heavy. They don't take up much room. And yeah, it's a wonderful compromise between functionality and price. So that's what I'm looking for. And as well, they last forever. They don't seem to crack. They don't wear out as far as being waterproof goes. So yeah, there are some really good options out there to consider. And I think as far as rain gear goes, I don't really have to say much more. So let's move on to footwear. Now, footwear could easily be a podcast, let alone a single episode. I've written articles on footwear, especially related to outdoors and hiking. And it's very activity specific, isn't it? Footwear. But let's talk about a few of the real basic things with footwear. And one of those, to me, and there is some research to back this up, is the weight of footwear. There's been a few studies done on footwear and the amount of energy extra that you have to spend because of the weight of footwear, and also the stiffness of footwear that contributes. Just think of anything in motion and having something that's heavy and trying to get it to move, the energy that takes. That's why cross-country skis are lightweight. That's why ski poles and walking poles are lightweight. These things that have to swing, the energy it takes to swing something heavier, of course, uses more energy. And we don't really need research to back that up, do we? But, it is catching up all the same. I think footwear really demands an episode all to itself. So I'm going to save some of these things for then because there's so much to talk about. However, the weight, go lightweight. And this makes such a difference. Anytime I've had lightweight footwear on compared to something heavier, what a difference. It's freeing. It really is, going lightweight. Breathability, it's not as much of a concern with your footwear. You can wear non-breathable footwear like the waterproof hiking boots, types of rubber boots that you can jump in puddles with. Yeah, not a big deal. You do probably want wool socks all the time in your footwear. At least that's what I think. Just to help keep your feet warm, even if everything does get wet. Of course, there's the obvious things like tread. What kind of tread do you need? What kind of tread do you want? There, there's a lot of problems with those aggressive tread boots. Yes, you can climb up the cliff with these things, right? If you got these aggressive treads. But on the well-used hiking trails in hilly country, there's a real problem with erosion. And these aggressive boots claw into the ground, and even if they only raise a little bit of dirt each time, next rainstorm, that gets washed away. And if you repeat this thousands of times on the same trail from many hikers, yeah, that can be a problem. So there's that. There's safety. What about ankle support? Do you need ankle support? Really? Do you? Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking probably not. Depends on the person, I guess, and if they're carrying a backpack and whatnot. I find ankle support to be quite restrictive. I don't like it myself. I tend not to use it. But I also recently bought a pair of boots that go over the ankle, the first pair in a very long time I've had like that. And the reason for these are not for protection, not for support. It's for colder weather, spring and fall. And it's for wetter conditions. I mean, it's been very wet the last couple of years where I hike, and being able to walk through a little bit deeper water without getting soaked, it can be hard if you don't have something that goes over your ankle. So I'm giving these a second chance. The footwear nowadays is so light compared to what people were wearing in the 70s and even 80s.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Calling all nature rebels and podcast aficionados, I hope you're enjoying today's podcast episode. Why not help ignite the flames of our wild community by leaving a rating and review right now? Your words are the sparks that fuel our journey. Likewise, share the Reverie Nature podcast across your social networks like the spreading branches of an ancient tree. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, in wildness is the preservation of the world. Now let's get back to the podcast. So, I think winter footwear, this is especially true where we really have to bulk up. It's the bulk that matters when you're trying to stay warm. If you have thin material and you're trying to get warmth, or using thin materials to insulate, it doesn't work so well in my experience. You need bulk. So if you have footwear that says they're good to minus 50 or 40 and they're only like 3/4 of an inch thick, yeah, try it and see what happens. I don't know. You really need bulk, and that's why in the wintertime, I'm a huge fan of traditional footwear like the mucklucks or kamiks. You just need the bulk, right? And the problem is with some of the winter footwear, it gets very heavy when you start adding this bulk if you have the heavy rubber bottoms. The problem is for me, I'm often in a very humid climate where the temperatures fluctuate, so we'll get snow, and then it turns warm and it melts, and we get this wet snow all the time. So using that lightweight or leather footwear, yeah, it's going to get wet too often. I usually have to go to synthetic or like a plastic or rubber bottom or shell. So it's always going to be heavy in that sense. But I think for the most part, I'm going to save footwear for another day, and I'm going to talk in lots of detail about it. For now, there's just so many things to consider for footwear and the type of activity that it's too activity specific to really do a good talk here, just besides weight considerations and whatnot. But let's just briefly also talk about gaiters. I'm not talking about alligators. We're talking about the gaiters that you put over your boots that cover part of your pant leg. These are pretty nice. Cross-country skiers in the 60s and 70s used to use these a lot. And what it would do would go over those small little boots they used to wear. And they'd clip onto the laces, wrap around just below your ankle, and go up halfway up to your knees. and there'd be a little zipper there so you could take them off. And that would keep the snow out of your socks and out of your boots. Gaiters are being used now in all kinds of climates, even to keep ticks off. So some people will put them over their hiking boots to help, they might be waterproof, these gaiters. Some of them are anyway. So you can, keep the lower part of your pants dry in wetter conditions, keep the burrs off your pants. Again, keep the ticks from getting under, onto your skin by your pant cuffs. So, gaiters is something to consider. I tend not to use them myself except in the wintertime when I'm cross-country skiing, but I have thought about using them in the summer as well. As far as gloves go, I've talked about gloves enough, I think, already. So, yeah, there's lots of variations of gloves, and depending on your climate, wet, dry, are you going to be using gloves by the fire? You need leather in that case. Let's just move on from there. I'm just eager to get to bug protection, and your clothing is your protection against bugs. So what can you do? I mentioned that synthetic clothing, some of the synthetic clothing anyway, especially the pants, has a very tight knit that is bug proof. The mosquitoes can't bite through it, and they're not too hot, so you can wear them on a nice sunny day when the mosquitoes are out. They will not bite through, and you're protected and happy. As well, if you tuck your pant legs into your socks and you're in tick country, which is a sad reality for many of us, you can monitor the ticks because they'll be walking up your legs. It's typically in the grasses at the edges of forests and whatnot, although you can kind of get them anywhere, I guess. But what happens is, as you're walking through the woods, they grab hold, typically, in my experience, to the front of your pants, and they crawl up the front of your pants. Because as you're walking through, that's the first thing they can grab a hold of. So what you can do with these synthetic pants, the tightly knit things, the outdoors pants, you just monitor for ticks, and you can see them crawling up your legs, and just a quick flick and off they go. Doing that regularly if you're bushwhacking. Anyway, they're good for mosquito bites too, certainly black flies, deer flies, so great option. As far as shirts go, yeah, I can't wear synthetic shirts. It's not like I can over my pants, because they just don't breathe well. Not the ones that can keep mosquitoes from biting anyway. So I need a natural fiber for my top. And if it's hot out, what I'll do is I will wear a t-shirt, a wool t-shirt, just as soft as cotton. So there's some really great products out there, as I mentioned. And if I am wearing a long sleeve shirt, it is also natural fibers. Not cotton, though, of course. It'll be wool. And what I'll wear over that is a bug jacket. And bug jackets are great. You can get the bug nets, the ones that just go over your head. But then if it's warm out, what about your arms? You got to wear something heavy over your arms to protect your arms from the bugs. The bug jackets that I use are not the ones that are all screen or all mesh. I'm not a fan of those for a few reasons. They get caught on branches. I don't know, the mosquitoes seem to, it bunches up on your arm in the wrong spot, and the bugs still find a way to bite through somehow when they're really thick. They're usually dark in color for some reason, which makes them very hot. The air goes through them, but doesn't, it doesn't keep out wind or anything, and the air goes through, but they're still pretty hot. The air still kind of clings to you with those. And with the sun beaten down, those dark colors are not good. You want the light colors. Same with all clothing, of course. The lighter colors reflect the heat. The darker colors absorb heat. That's a consideration, of course. So in the summertime, lighter colors for your outer layers is ideal if you want to get rid of some heat or not absorb as much heat. Anyway, back to the bug jackets. The ones I like have that canvas or a synthetic material that looks like the pant material over most of it, except for the sides and the face and whatnot. So what it does is you have lots of screen, and the screen is dark. It's like a black, I think. But for the most part, this jacket is light beige, and it's tough in the woods. The outer arms are the synthetic material, not the mesh, so you can brush up against branches and not worrying about ripping them. The light color reflects the heat, so you don't have to worry about them being too hot. They're loose. Yeah, and they work wonderful. One tip, though, when you're considering a bug jacket, one that obviously has a headpiece, some of the headpieces can zip right off. They tend to all have zippers, though. The one I have, it doesn't zip right off, and I'm fine with that. But what is important about that zipper is you want to be able to fold back that headpiece when the bugs aren't quite as bad because you're walking or whatever it is, or maybe they're only half bad and you just want to have your face without a screen over it, which is, it's not that pleasant being under a screen. You want the zipper to open up the front. If there's going to be a hole in the hooded part, have that hole so the zipper opens up right in the front part, not so you have to reach around and unzip 3/4 of it to get it over your face. Because there certainly are conditions where there's enough bugs out, but not quite enough to have the full face gear on, so you just want a little opening that you kind of put over the brim of your hat and just enough for your face to stick out. And if you have a zipper that opens up from further to the side, then you have to have more of that opening, and then mosquitoes get in that way. Yeah, those little things make a difference. Not to mention when you want to eat or you have a bowl of soup or whatnot, you don't want to have that zipper open any more than you have to in some conditions. You just want a little hole there to get some food in. You don't have to worry about liquids. You can have that zipper closed right up and you can drink right through that mesh without worrying about it. And what I found when I've been in mosquito country is that screen tends to rub on your nose. So maybe it's just my nose, but if your nose obviously sticking out from your face, that screen just tends to sit on your nose and it actually gets abrasive and kind of annoying. So what better bug jackets will have is elastics on a little pull elastic string that you can tighten or loosen the bug net around your face so it doesn't pull on your face and rub on your face, because it'll actually start wearing on the skin, if you don't have the right netting. Some of them have a little brim around the front, which helps keep it off your face. I find that brim is usually too useless to really work because after you put your bug net away a few times, it gets all crumpled and yeah. So if you have a small brimmed hat that you can get under there, a ball cap probably has too big of a peak to fit under there, but a small brimmed hat otherwise, like one of those cycling caps even, yeah, that can be really quite nice to help keep that off your face. And like I say, keep the zipper, one with the zipper that opens up just in the front so you can flip it up over your face and, not have a bug net over your face when you can get away with it. You also, this is an important tip, get one that's like 3 sizes above what you normally wear. If you're normally wearing large or extra large, get the largest one you can buy. If it's 4XL or 3XL, get that. You want these things to fit loosely, right? They're not meant to fit tight. And if they do fit tight, there's probably a better chance that it's going to be up against your skin somewhere and the bugs will be able to bite through in those vulnerable areas where the screen is. So I always get mine very large. If it's, and that helps you get it over whatever layers you might be wearing, although you're probably not wearing many layers in the middle of summer when you're worried about bugs. But if you are, if it's the evening time, for instance, and you got a summer jacket on and you're just wearing this to go over your head for the most part, yeah, it has to get over your jacket easily. There should be bungee cord-like strings to pull in at your waist, around your head to help form that fit better. Also around your cuffs. And the reason you want this extra size is so when you're walking, those sleeves can literally hang over the tips of your fingers or close to it. Because what happens is if you have a tendency not to want to wear bug spray like myself, you don't really want to put the spray on your hands, and therefore having your sleeves come over your hands when you're walking is great. And if you can zip up those bungee cords around your hand as well, that helps as well. Although what I tend to do when I'm walking is I'll just have my hands in there, and it's not too often a mosquito will try and fly up that way anyway. If they do, I just flick them away, so no problem. So that's my tip on bug protection. If you are going to use bug spray, be aware that bug spray on your hands, usually that it's a DEET often. And what DEET does is it melts things. So the rubber on your flashlight or on your tools like your GPS buttons or your phone buttons, anything rubberized, this stuff will melt it. So when you're whatever you're touching, when you have bug spray on your hands, be wary of that because it can start damaging some of your gear. If you are going to use bug spray, consider using it on your clothing instead of your skin. That can help. Even that trick with the handkerchief, why not? Or your hat, spray that instead of right on your skin. That might be the healthier option. Otherwise, there's natural versions of bug spray, of course. They don't tend to last as long as DEET. When you put them on, they tend to need more applications. Some of them work pretty good, others not so much. I've tried various home remedies. I had one that was sort of working for a while, and then I kind of lost track of that. Otherwise, as far as legs go, in the summertime, yeah, you can put the bug spray on or just wear the long pants. The long synthetic pants, they're not that hot, especially if you're using the lighter colors. The mosquitoes can't bite through. One thing about the mosquitoes, this is mosquito protection is not somewhere you want to cheap out on. You need it. Oh my goodness. Some people, the bugs will just drive them crazy. Some people react to bug bites more than others. I think people perhaps get acclimatized to the bugs and their skin stops reacting to the bites and therefore it doesn't irritate them as much. However, getting protected from the bugs is a big bonus if you're out there, psychologically and physically. It's something you really want to consider and be prepared for. I'm not even against carrying some DEET in tick country too, to spray over my boots and pants at the bottom cuffs. That will help. At least we're told that helps, spraying DEET on the lower limbs to help keep those ticks from grabbing a hold and climbing up. So never use those sort of things on pets, of course. If you did not know that can be pretty hard on them. So keep bug spray off pets. Check with your vet if you're unsure, if you want to help in some way. And there's one last topic that could easily be a podcast, not to mention a few episodes, and that's, environmentally sourced materials. There's the plastics that's tied to the oil industry, right? They're petrochemical clothing. So, guess where it comes from? There's considerations with the natural fibers too. Is it ethically sourced? Cottons, there's cotton and pesticides. There's brutal. There's so many pesticides used with cottons. There's the organic choices as well. So there's that consideration. We're not going to get into it now, but it's something you might be thinking of. And the aesthetics, besides the overall look, it's what fits in for you too. Like when you're in the woods, does it bother you that your clothing is, has logos all over it or it's flashy colors? Maybe not. For others, the aesthetics matters more and they want it to fit in more. They want it to be a little more timeless and they want their gear and their clothing to be a little more timeless looking. So a little less of the synthetics perhaps, or the flashy colors, a little more of the natural fibers. These are considerations that may or may not matter to you. And I think that's a topic for another time. So in closing, remember, clothing is your first line of defense on keeping you comfortable and happy in the woods. It's your shelter. You might need an extended shelter through tents and whatever means, but clothing is your number one defense, and it matters. Consider it well. In future episodes, I will be digging into clothing for particular activities. Thank you for joining us on the Reverie Nature Podcast. Remember to subscribe for more captivating episodes exploring the wonders of the natural world. Until next time, may you saunter forth embracing nature's song, and may the whispers of the wilderness linger in your heart.
And floating above the forest